Can you imagine a war that lasted less than the time it takes to watch a sitcom episode? In the annals of history, wars are often defined by their duration and devastation. Some stretch for years, even decades, leaving behind trails of destruction and human suffering. But what if I told you there was a war that barely lasted the length of a short lunch break? Yes, you heard it right. Today, we are going to delve into the shortest recorded war in human history, the Anglo-Zanzibar War. The date was August 27, 1896. The mighty British Empire, at the pinnacle of its power, found itself at odds with the Sultanate of Zanzibar, a small island nation off the east coast of Africa. It was a confrontation that would go down in history, not so much for its scale or the issues at stake, but for its sheer brevity. The conflict was sparked by the death of Sultan Hamad bin Tuwaini, who was believed to be a British ally. His cousin, Khalid bin Bargash, seized the opportunity and declared himself the new sultan without British approval. This act of defiance was seen as a direct challenge to the British Empire's authority and influence in the region. The British, keen on maintaining their dominance, issued an ultimatum to Khalid: step down or face the consequences. As you may guess, Khalid chose to stand his ground, and the stage was set for an unprecedented military confrontation. The British warships in the harbor, their cannons aimed at the Sultan's palace, were ready for action. What followed was a brief but intense bombardment that lasted only between 38 to 45 minutes. Yes, in less than the time it takes to cook a pizza, a war had begun and ended, leaving in its wake a changed political landscape. And so, the Anglo-Zanzibar War clinched its place in the history books as the shortest recorded war, a testament to the swift and overwhelming might of the British Empire during its colonial heyday. Now that we've set the stage, let's unravel the events of this war. Every war starts with a spark. The spark for the Anglo-Zanzibar War was a broken treaty. The catalyst for this brief but significant conflict was a document known as the Hamilton Treaty of 1890. This was not an ordinary piece of paper, but an agreement that held the balance of power between two nations, the British Empire and the Sultanate of Zanzibar. The treaty stated, in no uncertain terms, that the appointment of a new sultan required British approval. This condition was not a mere formality, but was intended to safeguard British interests in the region. The Sultanate of Zanzibar was a key player in the spice trade and a strategic ally for Britain in its colonial pursuits. Enter Khalid bin Bargash, the man who would light the fuse of war. Upon the death of the reigning sultan, Hamad bin Tuwaini, Khalid seized the opportunity and declared himself the new sultan. This bold move was a direct violation of the Hamilton Treaty. Khalid's actions were not just a slap in the face of the British Empire, they were a challenge to its authority. The British, who were keen on maintaining their influence in Zanzibar, were not about to let this audacious action go unchecked. It's important to note that Khalid was not some naive or impulsive leader. He was fully aware of the potential consequences of his actions, yet he chose to ignore the stipulations of the treaty, believing perhaps that the British would hesitate to respond with force. However, the British Empire was not known for its leniency, especially when its authority was challenged. The British officials in Zanzibar, led by Basil Cave, wasted no time in delivering an ultimatum to Khalid, demanding that he step down. Khalid, however, remained defiant, refusing to bow to the British demands. His defiance was the final straw that triggered the British response. Khalid's defiance led to the sudden and swift response from the British. The British didn't take Khalid's defiance lightly. They decided to respond, and respond they did. The British Empire, a global superpower of the time, was not about to let Khalid bin Bargash, a man who had seized the Sultanate of Zanzibar without their approval, go unchecked. They issued an ultimatum, a final demand that was non-negotiable. Khalid was given a choice: step down from his self-proclaimed throne or face the wrath of the British Empire. This was not a decision to be taken lightly. Khalid, however, was not one to be easily intimidated. He refused to comply with the British demands, declaring his readiness to defend his claim to the throne. His determination was unquestionable. but his military strength, in comparison to the British, was undeniably lacking. On the other side, the British began their preparations for the inevitable confrontation. Ships were positioned strategically around the harbor of Zanzibar, their cannons pointing towards the palace where Khalid had taken refuge. The British had a clear advantage, both in terms of firepower and strategic positioning. They were prepared for battle, yet their preference was still for Khalid to surrender peacefully. Khalid, in turn, began his own preparations. He gathered his forces around the palace, ready to defend his claim to the throne. His men were poorly armed compared to the British and lacked their military training. But what they didn't lack was their spirit and loyalty to Khalid. The tension was palpable. The stakes were high. And as the deadline of the British ultimatum drew nearer, there was a sense of impending doom. Both sides were prepared for a confrontation, yet there was a hope, albeit faint, for a peaceful resolution. However, as the clock ticked away, it became clear that a peaceful resolution was not to be. Khalid's refusal to step down and the British determination to uphold their authority set the stage for what was to come. With the stage set for a confrontation, the shortest war in history was about to begin. The war started at 9:02 a.m., but it wouldn't last long. You see, the British forces, led by General Matthews, wasted no time. Their warships, anchored off the coast, immediately began a bombardment of the Sultan's palace. The thundering sounds of the cannons echoed across the harbor, a terrifying symphony of war that marked the beginning of the end for Sultan Khalid bin Bargash. The Sultan, however, was not ready to give up without a fight. He had gathered his men, a force of about 2,000 strong, and they prepared to resist the onslaught. Their weapons were mostly antique rifles and a few pieces of artillery, a far cry from the modern firepower of the British forces. But their spirit was undeterred. As the British shells rained down on the palace, Khalid's men fired back, but they were fighting a losing battle. The British firepower was too much for them. The palace, once a symbol of the Sultan's power and prestige, was quickly reduced to rubble under the relentless barrage. In the midst of the chaos, Khalid made a decision. He could see that his men were outmatched and that the palace, his beloved home, was being destroyed. He decided to retreat. Leaving behind the ruins of his palace, Khalid and a small group of his loyal followers slipped out of the city and into the surrounding countryside. Meanwhile, the British forces continued their bombardment, unaware that their target had already fled. When they finally ceased fire, the once grand palace was nothing more than a smoldering ruin. The city was in shock, the smoke and dust slowly settling on the scene of destruction. And just like that, it was over. In less than 40 minutes, the British had effectively ended the war. There was no formal surrender from Khalid, no white flag raised in defeat. But the devastation was clear. The British had won, and the shortest war in history had come to an abrupt end. By 9:40 a.m., the war was over. In under an hour, a war had started and ended. But what were the repercussions? The aftermath of the shortest war in history was far from brief. In the wake of the 38-minute conflict, the once jubilant streets of Zanzibar were eerily silent. The death toll was staggering for such a short engagement. Approximately 500 lives were lost, leaving behind a city in mourning. The Sultan Khalid bin Bargash, who had dared to defy the British, was swiftly captured. He was found holed up in the American consulate, a futile attempt at seeking asylum. The British, relentless in their pursuit of justice, or perhaps domination, extradited him to their shores. There, he was put on trial, a spectacle that drew the attention of the world. The verdict? Banishment to Seychelles and then to St. Helena. Khalid's reign, much like the war, was abruptly cut short. In Khalid's place, the British installed a puppet sultan, Hamoud bin Mohammed. Hamoud was more amenable to the British interests, a stark contrast to Khalid's rebellious spirit. He was a sultan in name, but the true power lay in the hands of the British consul and the representative of the Sultan of Oman. Zanzibar, although ostensibly still a sultanate, was in reality a British protectorate. The Sultan's palace, once a symbol of Zanzibar's sovereignty, lay in ruins. The British naval bombardment had effectively reduced it to rubble. The palace was subsequently rebuilt and renamed the House of Wonders, perhaps as a constant reminder of the war. Yet despite the devastation and the loss, the spirit of Zanzibar remained unbroken. The city rebuilt, the people persevered, and life went on. But the memory of the war lingered, a ghostly echo in the city's bustling streets and vibrant markets, a reminder of the time when the sovereignty of a nation was decided in less than an hour. The shortest war in history left a lasting mark on Zanzibar. So what can we take away from the shortest war in history? Firstly, the cause of the war. The Anglo-Zanzibar War was a direct result of the death of Sultan Hamid bin Thuwaini of Zanzibar, and the subsequent unauthorized ascension of Sultan Khalid bin Bargash to the throne. This succession violated the Heligoland-Zanzibar Treaty between Britain and Germany, which stated that the British had to approve any new sultan. The refusal of Khalid to step down led to the swift and deadly conflict. Secondly, the progression and end of the battle were remarkably quick. The British ultimatum expired at 9 o'clock on the morning of August 27, 1896. The bombardment began immediately, and within a mere 38 minutes, the Sultan's palace was in ruins, and Khalid was on the run. This war, while short, was not without its casualties. Approximately 500 people lost their lives, the majority on the Zanzibari side. Thirdly, the aftermath of the battle saw the installation of a British-friendly Sultan, Hamoud bin Mohammed, who ruled under British guidance. The swift resolution of this conflict allowed Britain to continue to influence the politics and economy of Zanzibar, which was a crucial part of their colonial strategy in East Africa. Finally, the Anglo-Zanzibar War underscores the power dynamics of the colonial era. It demonstrates the lengths to which the British were willing to go to maintain control over their colonial territories. While it may have been the shortest recorded war in history, its implications were far-reaching, affecting not just Zanzibar, but also the trajectory of British colonial policy. And so, we see that history isn't always measured in length, but in impact. The Anglo-Zanzibar War, though brief, offers a fascinating glimpse into the complexities of colonial politics. That's it for today's episode on the shortest war in history. We hope you enjoyed this intriguing journey back in time, and that it sparked your curiosity to learn more about the fascinating events that shape our world. Now, if you're hungry for more such intriguing facts and stories from history, consider subscribing to 50 Shades Facts. Our channel is dedicated to bringing you the most interesting, lesser-known facts from various shades of history, from ancient times to the present day. We delve into wars, revolutions, scientific discoveries, cultural phenomena, and so much more. By subscribing, you'll never miss out on any of our content. Each video is a new opportunity to learn something you didn't know before, to challenge your assumptions, and to enrich your understanding of the world. So, don't wait. Hit that subscribe button now and join our community of history enthusiasts. Remember, history is not just about the past. It's about understanding our present and predicting our future. Until next time, stay curious.